The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates, painting the sidewalks in hues of gold and amber. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak that stood sentinel in my front yard, its branches reaching towards the heavens like gnarled fingers. It was the kind of day that made you want to sink into a comfortable chair on the porch, a cold drink in hand, and simply watch the world go by. And that's exactly what I was doing. My porch, a simple wooden structure adorned with a few potted plants and a weathered rocking chair, was my sanctuary. It was a place where I could escape the stresses of daily life, breathe in the fresh air, and reconnect with the simple pleasures of existence. I'd lived in this house for 5 years, and the porch had become an extension of myself, a silent witness to countless sunsets, late-night conversations, and quiet moments of reflection. Willow Creek Estates, on the surface, appeared to be the epitome of suburban tranquility. Rows of identical houses lined the streets, each meticulously maintained and adorned with perfectly manicured lawns. The residents were, for the most part, friendly and neighborly, always ready with a smile and a wave. But beneath the veneer of idyllic suburban life, there lurked a certain unease, a subtle tension that seemed to permeate the very air. It was the unspoken pressure to conform, to adhere to the rigid standards of the homeowners association, to maintain the illusion of perfection at all costs. I'd had a few minor run-ins with the HOA myself, a slightly overgrown hedge, a misplaced garbage can, a Christmas light left up a week too late. Minor infractions that had earned me polite but firm letters from the association. I'd always complied, of course, but the experience had left me with a lingering sense of resentment. It felt like living under constant surveillance, as if every aspect of my life was subject to the scrutiny and judgment of others. And then there was Karen. Karen lived 2 houses down, a woman whose name had become synonymous with suburban tyranny in my mind. She was the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek Estates, the enforcer of every rule and regulation, the self-righteous busybody who seemed to derive pleasure from pointing out the flaws and shortcomings of her neighbors. I'd encountered her a few times before, a complaint about my lawn being too long, a passive-aggressive comment about my choice of paint color, but I'd always managed to brush her off with a polite smile and a vague promise to take care of it. But today was different. Today, Karen had decided to escalate things. I sat on my porch, enjoying the peace and quiet. I saw her marching purposefully towards my house, her face contorted in a mask of righteous indignation. I knew, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that this was not going to be a pleasant encounter. The tranquility of the afternoon was about to be shattered, and my peaceful sanctuary was about to become the stage for a confrontation I never saw coming. The air, already thick, with the scent of freshly cut grass, now crackled with an almost palpable tension. This was going to be interesting. The approaching storm front that was Karen finally reached my porch steps, her sensible walking shoes, the kind favored by power walkers and mall enthusiasts alike, crunched on the gravel path as she planted herself firmly at the edge of my little domain. Her arms were crossed, her lips pursed, and her eyes narrowed in a way that suggested I had personally offended her entire lineage. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice sharp enough to cut through the gentle breeze. "Are you aware that you are loitering?" I blinked, momentarily stunned by the sheer absurdity of her accusation. "Loitering," I repeated, my voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "On my own front porch?" "Yes, loitering," she emphasized, as if I were a particularly slow-witted child. "Sitting there, day after day, it's unsightly. It gives the neighborhood a bad impression." I resisted the urge to point out that her meticulously sculpted hedges, resembling a herd of sleeping green elephants, were arguably more unsightly than my humble rocking chair and potted geraniums. Instead, I opted for a measured response. "I'm simply enjoying the afternoon," I explained calmly. "I own this house that I'm allowed to sit on my porch." "That's not the point," she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "The point is, it looks suspicious. People might think you're up to no good. We have standards to maintain in this neighborhood." "Suspicious," I echoed, my eyebrows arching involuntarily. "What exactly do you think I'm doing that's so suspicious? Plotting the overthrow of the HOA? Organizing a rebellion against perfectly manicured lawns?" Her face flushed a deeper shade of red. Don't get smart with me, she warned, her voice dripping with venom. I've been watching you. You're always out here, just sitting. It's not normal. Not normal. I couldn't help but chuckle, though there was a growing knot of anger tightening in my stomach. Last I checked, sitting on one's porch was a perfectly acceptable pastime. It's called relaxation. Maybe you should try it sometime. This isn't a joke, she retorted, her voice reaching a near shriek. This is a respectable neighborhood, and we don't want people like you attracting the wrong kind of attention. People like me? I challenged, my patience wearing thin. What exactly do you mean by people like me? She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around as if searching for the right words to express her thinly veiled disdain. You know what I mean, she finally said, her voice dripping with condescension. You just don't fit in. That was it. That was the line. The unspoken prejudice, the subtle discrimination, finally laid bare. The frustration that had been simmering within me finally boiled over. And who are you to decide who fits in? I demanded, my voice rising to match hers. This is my home, and I have every right to sit on my porch and enjoy it. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not disturbing the peace, and I'm certainly not loitering. So I suggest you mind your own business and leave me alone. But Karen wasn't about to back down. She stood her ground, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. I'm warning you, she said, her voice low and menacing. I'm going to report you to the HOA. That they'll take care of this, that you'll be sorry. Karen's threat hung in the air, thick and heavy like the humidity that often precedes a summer thunderstorm. Her eyes narrowed, and a smug, self-satisfied smirk crept across her face, as if she had just delivered a checkmate in a particularly challenging game of suburban chess. I, however, was far from defeated. I was just getting started. Go ahead, I challenged, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Report me to the HOA. Tell them I'm loitering on my own property. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to waste their time dealing with such a pressing issue. Her smirk faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. Don't think I won't, she hissed. I have connections. I know people on the board. They take these things very seriously. Oh, I'm sure they do, I replied, rolling my eyes. Because heaven forbid someone should actually enjoy living in this perfectly manicured prison. What's next, Karen? Are you going to start measuring the height of my grass with a ruler, demanding that I repaint my house in an approved shade of beige? My words seemed to hit a nerve. Her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You think this is funny? She shrieked, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of a few curious neighbors peering out from behind their curtains. You think you can just do whatever you want, with no regard for the rules? This isn't some kind of free-for-all. You know, we have standards to uphold. And what standards are those exactly? I challenged, stepping closer to her, my voice low and dangerous. The standard of being a judgmental, nosy busybody who has nothing better to do than harass her neighbors. Because if that's the standard, then congratulations, Karen, you've exceeded all expectations. She sputtered, unable to find the words to respond. Her face was now a vibrant shade of crimson, and her chest heaved with indignation. I can't believe you're talking to me like this, she stammered. I'm just trying to protect the integrity of this neighborhood. By harassing your neighbors? I countered. By making them feel unwelcome in their own homes. Is that really what you call protecting the integrity of the neighborhood? Someone has to do it, she insisted, her voice cracking with emotion. If we don't enforce the rules, then everything will fall apart. This place will become a slum. Oh, I see, I said, feigning understanding. So you're basically a one-woman wrecking crew, single-handedly preventing Willow Creek Estates from descending into chaos. That you're a true hero, Karen, a regular Joan of Arc of suburban conformity. My sarcasm was lost on her. She was too consumed by her own self-righteousness to recognize the irony in my words. You'll see, she said, her voice trembling with anger. You'll all see that I'll make sure of it. That I'm going to report you to the HOA, and I'm going to tell them everything. How you're always out here, loitering. How you're disrespecting the rules. How you're being a nuisance. With that, she turned on her heel and stomped away, her sensible walking shoes kicking up little puffs of dust as she marched back towards her own perfectly manicured prison. That I watched her go, a mixture of anger and amusement swirling within me. I knew that this was far from over. Karen was not the type to back down easily. She would undoubtedly file a complaint with the HOA, and I would likely have to deal with the consequences. But I refused to be intimidated, and I refused to let her bully me into conforming to her narrow-minded vision of suburban perfection, that I would stand my ground, and I would fight for my right to enjoy my own home, even if it meant battling the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates. The slam of Karen's screen door echoed through the otherwise quiet street, punctuating the end of our increasingly absurd confrontation. But the lingering tension remained, a palpable weight pressing down on me as I sank back into my rocking chair. The peace I had been enjoying just moments before was now shattered, replaced by a simmering mix of anger, frustration, and a growing sense of humiliation. That I glanced around, acutely aware of the curious eyes peering from behind closed curtains. Mrs. Henderson from across the street quickly ducked back inside, but not before I caught a glimpse of her wide-eyed expression. That I imagined the gossip mill already churning, the whispers and speculations spreading like wildfire through the neighborhood. I was now officially that neighbor, the one who had dared to defy Karen and her self-righteous crusade for suburban perfection. A wave of embarrassment washed over me. I had never been one to attract attention, preferring to blend in and avoid conflict whenever possible. But now, I was the center of a neighborhood drama, all because I had the audacity to sit on my own porch. The absurdity of the situation was almost comical, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being unfairly targeted, of being judged and scrutinized for simply being myself. That I tried to rationalize Karen's behavior. Perhaps she was simply bored, a lonely woman seeking validation and control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Perhaps she genuinely believed that she was acting in the best interests of the neighborhood, blinded by her own rigid sense of right and wrong. But no matter how I tried to understand her, I couldn't excuse her blatant disrespect and her attempts to bully me into conforming to her narrow-minded standards. The threat of HOA action loomed large. That I knew that Karen would waste no time in filing a complaint, and I had no doubt that she would embellish the details to make me look as bad as possible. I pictured myself having to defend my loitering to a panel of stern-faced board members, all while Karen sat there with a smug look on her face, reveling in my discomfort. The thought filled me with a sense of dread. I considered my options. I could apologize to Karen, try to smooth things over, and promise to be more considerate in the future. But the thought of kowtowing to her demands, of admitting that I had done something wrong when I knew I hadn't, was unbearable. I could also try to reason with her, to explain that I wasn't trying to cause trouble, that I simply enjoyed sitting on my porch and relaxing. But I knew that any attempt at rational discussion would be futile. Karen was not interested in reason or compromise. She was only interested in control. That my frustration grew with each passing moment. That I felt trapped, caught between my desire to stand up for myself and my fear of the consequences. That I longed to escape, to retreat inside my house and shut out the world. But I refused to be driven away from my own sanctuary. That I refused to let Karen I sat there, on my porch, in my rocking chair, and I waited. I waited for the HOA letter. I waited for the neighborhood gossip to die down, and I waited for the storm that was Karen to finally pass. But most of all, I waited for something to change, for something to break the tension and restore the peace that had been so rudely shattered. Little did I know, my wait was about to be over. The cavalry was on its way. The sun beat down on my face, amplifying the heat of my frustration. Every creak of the rocking chair, every rustle of leaves in the oak tree, seemed to mock my predicament. At my porch, once a haven of peace and tranquility, now felt like a stage, a public display of my humiliation. That I was trapped, not by physical barriers, but by the invisible walls of social pressure and the fear of judgment. The internal debate raged on. Apologize, swallow my pride, and offer a hollow peace offering to appease Karen and avoid further conflict. The thought made my skin crawl. That it would be an admission of guilt, a validation of her petty tyranny. It would set a precedent, signaling that I was willing to be bullied into conforming to her ridiculous standards. Argue? Engage in a prolonged battle with the HOA, defending my right to sit on my own porch. The prospect was exhausting. It would involve endless paperwork, tedious meetings, and the potential for escalating the conflict even further. And even if I won, the victory would feel hollow. tainted by the bitterness of the struggle. Retreat. Simply give up, retreat inside my house, and avoid the porch altogether. The temptation was strong that it would be the easiest option, the path of least resistance. But it would also be a surrender. An admission that Karen had won.it would mean sacrificing my own peace and enjoyment for the sake of avoiding conflict. Each option felt equally unappealing, each fraught with its own set of consequences that I was caught in a catch-22, a no-win situation where any choice I made would only perpetuate the cycle of frustration and humiliation. The weight of it all pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe that I closed my eyes, trying to block out the judging eyes of the neighborhood. The relentless drone of my own internal monologue that I focused on the sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the gentle breeze rustling through the trees that I tried to find a sense of calm, a moment of peace amidst the chaos. But it was no use. The tension was too thick, the frustration too intense that I felt like a caged animal, pacing back and forth within the confines of my own mind that I longed for a release, for a way to break free from the suffocating pressure that was building inside me. And then I heard it at a distant rumble, growing steadily louder, a sound that resonated deep within my soul that it was the sound of engines, powerful and purposeful, a symphony of mechanical precision. It was a sound that I knew well, a sound that filled me with a sense of hope and anticipation. I opened my eyes, and I saw them. First, a black SUV, windows tinted, pulled smoothly to the curb directly in front of my house. Then another, and another, each one identical to the last, forming a precise line of polished metal and silent power. The engines idled, a low, throaty rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet. And then, the doors opened one by one. Figures emerged from the vehicles, each one clad in the crisp, immaculate uniform of the United States Marine Corps. Dress blues, sharp and imposing, their brass buttons gleaming in the afternoon sun. White gloves, spotless and pristine, snapped smartly into place. Their posture was perfect, their movements synchronized with an almost unsettling precision. They moved with a purpose, a sense of unwavering determination that only years of training and discipline could instill. There were 4 of them, each a towering figure of strength and resolve. They were my brothers, not by blood, but by bond, forged in the crucible of shared experience and unwavering loyalty. Sergeant Major Reyes, his face etched with the wisdom and weariness of countless deployments. Captain Miller, his eyes sharp and intelligent, radiating a quiet confidence. Gunnery Sergeant Davis, his presence imposing and unwavering, a rock of stability in any storm. And Corporal Johnson, young but resolute, his spirit burning bright with dedication and pride. They formed a perfect line in front of my house, a wall of unwavering support. Their presence was a statement, a declaration that I was not alone, that I had allies who would stand by me, no matter what. The effect was immediate and palpable. The curious eyes that had been peering from behind closed curtains quickly vanished. The neighborhood gossip mill ground to a halt. Even the birds seemed to hush their chirping, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The visual impact was stunning. In the midst of the perfectly manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses of Willow Creek Estates, they stood out like a beacon, a symbol of something larger, something more profound. They represented honor, courage, and commitment, values that seemed to have been forgotten in this world of petty grievances and superficial concerns. Relief washed over me in a tidal wave that I had been feeling trapped, isolated, and vulnerable. But now, with my brothers standing beside me, I felt a surge of strength and confidence that I knew that whatever Karen and the HOA threw at me, I could handle it, that I had the best support system a person could ask for. The anticipation was building. I knew that something significant was about to happen, something that would change the dynamic of this entire situation. Karen was about to learn that messing with me was not just a bad idea. It was a strategic blunder of epic proportions. The cavalry had arrived, and they were here to stay. The game was about to change. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as the Marines stood at attention. It was a silence that screamed volumes, a silence that spoke of discipline, authority, and unwavering resolve. And then, the sound of Karen's screen door creaking open shattered the stillness. She emerged cautiously, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She took a few tentative steps onto her lawn, her sensible walking shoes crunching on the grass. Her gaze darted back and forth between the Marines and me, her expression a study in confusion. The transformation was remarkable. The confident, self-righteous busybody who had been so eager to lecture me about standards and respectability just moments before was now a picture of uncertainty and hesitation. Her shoulders slumped, her chin tucked in, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely a whisper. What's going on here?" she stammered, her eyes darting nervously between the Marines. Sergeant Major Reyes, the senior Marine present, stepped forward, his presence radiating an aura of quiet authority. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "we are here to visit our friend and brother. Is there a problem?" Karen swallowed hard, her eyes widening even further. No problem," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "I was just wondering what all the commotion was about." The contrast between her previous aggression and her newfound timidity was almost comical. Just moments ago, she had been berating me, threatening me with HOA action, and questioning my right to exist in this neighborhood. Now, faced with the imposing presence of 4 United States Marines, she was reduced to a stuttering, apologetic shadow of her former self. She fidgeted with her hands, her gaze fixed on the ground. She seemed to shrink in size, as if trying to disappear into the perfectly manicured lawn. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban authority had crumbled, revealing the insecure, easily intimidated woman beneath that. I watched her, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. I had not asked for this intervention, but I couldn't deny the pleasure of witnessing Karen's comeuppance. She had tried to bully me, to intimidate me, to make me feel unwelcome in my own home. And now, she was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. The Marines stood silently, their expressions impassive, their presence a constant reminder of Karen's misjudgment. They didn't need to say a word. Their mere presence was enough to convey the message. "You messed with the wrong person." Karen continued to stammer and apologize, her voice barely above a whisper. She backtracked on her accusations, claiming that she had simply been concerned about my well-being. She even offered a weak, insincere apology for her earlier behavior. It was a pathetic display, a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation and avoid further embarrassment. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The mask had been lifted, and everyone had seen the true Karen beneath. A small-minded, insecure bully who preyed on those she perceived as weaker than herself. And now, she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. The tide had turned, and the power had shifted. Karen was no longer in control, and I, with my brothers standing beside me, was finally free. Sergeant Major Reyes maintained his unwavering gaze, his expression firm but respectful. "Ma'am," he continued, his voice calm and measured, "we understand there may have been some misunderstanding regarding our friend's presence on their own property." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "We would like to respectfully remind you that this is their home. They have every right to enjoy their property as they see fit, within the bounds of the law and the HOA regulations." Captain Miller stepped forward, his eyes conveying a quiet intelligence. "We've reviewed the HOA guidelines," he stated, his voice clear and authoritative, "and we find no clause prohibiting residents from sitting on their front porch. In fact, we believe it promotes community engagement and neighborhood camaraderie." He offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod to Gunnery Sergeant Davis, who cleared his throat, his presence radiating an aura of unwavering support. "Furthermore, ma'am," Davis added, his voice deep and resonant, "we would like to emphasize that our friend is a respected member of this community, a law-abiding citizen, and a veteran who has served this country with honor and distinction." Corporal Johnson, the youngest of the group, stood slightly behind the others, his posture ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on Karen with a look of quiet determination. That he didn't speak, but his presence was a powerful reminder of the unwavering commitment and dedication that these Marines embodied. Their interaction with Karen was a masterclass in controlled authority. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't resort to insults or threats, but their words were firm, their message clear. They would not tolerate any harassment or intimidation of their friend. They spoke with a unified voice, a testament to their unwavering camaraderie and their shared sense of duty. They were not just defending me. They were defending the principles of freedom, respect, and the right to enjoy one's own property without fear of persecution. They politely but firmly challenged Karen's accusations, dismantling her arguments with logic and reason. They reminded her of my rights as a homeowner and a citizen, emphasizing that her attempts to bully me were not only inappropriate but also potentially illegal. Their unwavering support was palpable. I felt a surge of gratitude and pride as I watched them stand up for me, their presence a shield against Karen's petty tyranny. They were more than just friends. They were brothers, bound by a shared sense of purpose and a commitment to protecting each other, no matter what. The effect on Karen was profound. She seemed to shrink under their scrutiny, her eyes darting nervously from one Marine to another. She stammered and apologized, her voice barely audible, her previous confidence completely shattered. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her actions had consequences, and that she was not as powerful or as untouchable as she had believed. The Marines had taken charge, not with aggression or force, but with calm, professional authority. They had reminded Karen of the values that truly mattered, the values that she had so easily forgotten in her pursuit of suburban perfection. And in doing so, they had not only defended me, but they had also restored a sense of balance and justice to our little corner of Willow Creek Estates. The silence stretched, broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves in the oak tree. The Marines stood at attention, their presence a silent testament to their unwavering commitment and dedication. Karen, her face pale and drawn, fidgeted nervously, her gaze darting from one Marine to another. It was Captain Miller who broke the silence, his voice calm and measured, but with an underlying current of steel. "Ma'am," he said, his eyes meeting hers directly, "we understand that you may have concerns about maintaining the standards of this community." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "However," he continued, his voice taking on a slightly more serious tone, "we would also like to remind you that the freedoms and rights that we all enjoy in this country were not freely given. They were earned through the sacrifices of countless men and women who have served in the armed forces, defending those freedoms against all enemies, foreign and domestic." He gestured subtly towards me, his eyes conveying a message of quiet pride. "Our friend here is one of those individuals. They served with honor and distinction, putting their life on the line to protect the very freedoms that you are now attempting to infringe upon." He didn't elaborate on the specifics of my service. There was no need to. The mere mention of my military background was enough to put the situation into perspective, to remind Karen of the sacrifices that had been made to ensure that she and all Americans could live in a free and just society. That it wasn't an aggressive statement. It wasn't a boastful display of military prowess. That it was simply a gentle reminder of the bigger picture, a subtle nudge to encourage Karen to reconsider her priorities and to recognize the importance of respecting the rights and freedoms of others. The effect was immediate and profound. Karen's eyes widened, and a look of understanding, perhaps even a hint of shame, flickered across her face. She seemed to realize, for the first time, that her petty grievances and her obsession with suburban perfection were insignificant in the face of the sacrifices that had been made to protect her freedom. She stammered an apology, her voice barely audible. I didn't realize," she said, her eyes downcast. I just want to keep this neighborhood nice." Captain Miller nodded, his expression softening slightly. "We understand, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But there are better ways to achieve that goal than by harassing your neighbors and infringing upon their rights." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Perhaps," he suggested, "you could consider volunteering your time to help maintain the community gardens or organizing a neighborhood cleanup event. There are many ways to contribute to the well-being of this community without resorting to bullying and intimidation." His words were a subtle rebuke, but they were also an invitation, an opportunity for Karen to redeem herself and to become a more positive and constructive member of the neighborhood. That it was up to her to decide whether she would accept that invitation or continue down the path of self-righteousness and petty tyranny. But whatever her decision, the Marines had made their point. They had reminded her of the values that truly mattered, and they had given her a chance to reflect on her actions and to make amends. And in doing so, they had not only defended me, but they had also planted a seed of hope for a more harmonious and respectful community in Willow Creek Estates. Karen mumbled something unintelligible, a jumble of apologies and excuses that seemed to melt into the afternoon air. She avoided eye contact, her gaze fixed on the ground as if searching for an escape route. The vibrant, self-assured woman who had confronted me just moments before had completely vanished, replaced by a shrinking, apologetic figure desperate to escape the situation. I should go, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I have things to do. She took a tentative step backwards, then another, her movements hesitant and uncertain. She seemed to be struggling to maintain her composure, her carefully constructed facade of suburban authority crumbling with each passing second. The Marines stood silently, their presence a constant reminder of her misjudgment. They didn't need to say a word. Their mere presence was enough to convey the message. You are not welcome here. Karen turned and fled, her sensible walking shoes crunching on the gravel path as she hurried back towards her house. She didn't look back. She didn't offer a final word of apology. She simply retreated, defeated and humiliated. The slam of her screen door echoed through the quiet street, punctuating the end of the confrontation. The tension that had been building for so long finally dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief and vindication that I watched her go. A wave of satisfaction washing over me. I had stood my ground. I had defended my right to enjoy my own property. And I had emerged victorious, thanks to the unwavering support of my brothers. The feeling of victory was sweet, but it was also tempered with a sense of sadness that I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for Karen. She was a prisoner of her own insecurities and her own narrow-minded vision of suburban perfection. She had allowed her obsession with control to consume her, driving her to harass and intimidate her neighbors in a misguided attempt to maintain order. But whatever her reasons, her actions were unacceptable, and she had finally faced the consequences. She had learned a valuable lesson, one that I hoped she would carry with her long after this incident was over. As Karen disappeared inside her house, I turned to my Marine brothers, my heart filled with gratitude and pride. Thank you, I said, my voice choked with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you. They smiled, their eyes conveying a message of unwavering support and camaraderie. We're always here for you, brother, Sergeant Major Reyes said, his voice deep and resonant. That's what family is for. The tension had broken. I was finally at peace, sitting on my porch, with my brothers by my side. As the echoes of Karen's retreating footsteps faded away, a wave of laughter erupted from our little group. The tension that had been building for so long finally broke, replaced by a shared sense of absurdity and relief. Well, that was interesting, I said, shaking my head and chuckling. I never thought I'd see the day that Karen was intimidated into submission by a squad of Marines. She definitely picked the wrong battle, Captain Miller replied, a wry smile playing on his lips. Some people just don't know when to quit. I still can't believe she accused you of loitering, Gunnery Sergeant Davis added, his voice booming with amusement. On your own front porch, that's a new one, even for me. We continued to laugh, recounting the most ridiculous moments of the confrontation, exaggerating Karen's expressions and mimicking her nervous stammer. The laughter was cathartic, a way of releasing the pent-up stress and frustration that had been building throughout the afternoon. But beneath the laughter, there was a deeper sense of meaning, a recognition of the importance of what had just transpired. IT was more than just a victory over a nosy neighbor. IT was a testament to the power of community, the importance of standing up for oneself, and the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. Seriously, though, I said, my voice becoming more serious. I don't know what I would have done without you guys. I was feeling pretty helpless there for a while. Hey, that's what we're here for, Sergeant Major Reyes replied, his eyes conveying a message of unwavering support. We always have each other's backs. That's the Marine Corps way. We fell silent for a moment, reflecting on the deeper meaning of our friendship. We had been through so much together, both in the military and in civilian life. We had faced danger, hardship, and loss, but we had always emerged stronger, thanks to the unwavering support of our brothers. The experience with Karen had reminded us of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. IT had shown us that even in the most mundane of situations, The values that we had learned in the Marine Corps, honor, courage, and commitment, were still relevant and important. That IT had also reminded us of the importance of community, that we had come together to support me. But we had also sent a message to the entire neighborhood. We will not tolerate bullying, intimidation, or any other form of harassment. We will stand up for each other, and we will defend our right to live in peace and harmony. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Willow Creek Estates, we sat on my porch, sharing stories, reminiscing about old times, and simply enjoying each other's company. The tension was gone, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. That I was surrounded by my brothers, and I knew that everything was going to be all right. The Karen situation would likely linger. The HOA complaint would probably materialize, but I knew I could handle it. I had a support system that was the envy of the neighborhood, and that was what truly mattered. True to form, a week later, the dreaded letter arrived. Crisp white paper, embossed with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo. It felt like a summons to appear before a kangaroo court. Karen had, indeed, filed a complaint, accusing me of repeated violations of community standards, disruptive behavior, and, of course, loitering. The letter demanded that I cease and desist my offensive behavior immediately and threatened further action, including fines and legal proceedings. If I failed to comply, I showed the letter to my Marine brothers, who, predictably, found the whole situation hilarious. "They're really going after you for sitting on your porch?" Captain Miller asked, his eyes wide with mock astonishment. "That's impressive." "Well, it's not funny," I said, trying to maintain a semblance of seriousness. "This could actually cause me some real problems that I don't want to get fined or have to deal with legal action." All right, Sergeant Major Reyes said, his voice becoming more serious. "Let's figure out how to handle this. That we're not going to let them bully you." We decided to take a proactive approach. Instead of waiting for the HOA to take further action, we would gather evidence to refute Karen's claims and demonstrate that I was, in fact, a responsible and law-abiding member of the community. First, we spoke with my immediate neighbors, the ones who had witnessed the confrontation with Karen. To my surprise, most of them were supportive. They had long been aware of Karen's tendency to harass and intimidate others, and they were glad to see someone finally stand up to her. Several of them agreed to write letters to the HOA, attesting to my good character and denying Karen's accusations. Next, we reviewed the HOA guidelines in detail, highlighting the sections that supported my right to enjoy my property. We also researched relevant legal precedents, demonstrating that HOAs could not arbitrarily restrict residents' rights without a valid reason. Finally, we prepared a detailed response to the HOA's letter, refuting each of Karen's claims with factual evidence and legal arguments. We emphasized that I was not loitering, but simply enjoying my own property, and that my behavior was not disruptive or offensive in any way. That we also included copies of the letters from my neighbors, as well as excerpts from the HOA guidelines and relevant legal cases. That we made it clear that I was prepared to fight for my rights, and that I would not be intimidated by Karen's baseless accusations. The letter was a masterpiece of calm, reasoned argumentation, backed by solid evidence and legal precedent. That IT was exactly the kind of response that you would expect from a group of highly trained and disciplined Marines. We sent the letter to the HOA, and then we waited. The waiting was nerve-wracking, but I felt confident that we had done everything we could to defend myself. I had the support of my brothers, the backing of my neighbors, and the weight of the law on my side. That I was ready for whatever the HOA threw at me. A week later, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was much shorter and more conciliatory. That IT stated that the board had reviewed my response and had decided to close the case. They acknowledged that I had the right to enjoy my property, and they apologized for any inconvenience or distress that the complaint had caused. That Karen's attempt to bully me into submission had failed. That I had stood my ground, I had defended my rights, and I had emerged victorious. And I had done it with the help of my Marine brothers, who had proven once again that they were the best support system a person could ask for. The HOA case was closed, Karen had retreated, and my Marine brothers had returned to their respective lives. But the experience left a lasting impact on me. That IT forced me to reevaluate my perspective and to adjust my approach to dealing with similar situations in the future. Before the incident with Karen, I had been content to blend in, to avoid conflict. And to let minor irritations slide, I had valued peace and quiet above all else, even if it meant sacrificing a small part of my own happiness and well-being. But the confrontation with Karen had shown me that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it's uncomfortable. You have to defend your rights, even if it means risking conflict. You have to refuse to be bullied, even if it means facing the wrath of a self-righteous neighbor or a petty HOA. That I realized that true peace and quiet cannot be achieved by simply avoiding conflict. It can only be achieved by creating a community where everyone feels respected, valued, and empowered to stand up for themselves. That I also learned the importance of not letting negativity and harassment disrupt my peace and enjoyment of my home. Karen had tried to steal my happiness, to make me feel unwelcome in my own sanctuary. But I refused to let her succeed. That I resolved to continue enjoying my porch, to continue sitting in my rocking chair, and to continue watching the world go by, regardless of what Karen or anyone else thought. That I would not allow their negativity to poison my mind or to steal my joy. That I also made a conscious effort to be more engaged in my community. That I started attending HOA meetings, not to complain or to cause trouble, but to offer constructive suggestions and to advocate for the rights of all residents. That I also volunteered my time to help maintain the community gardens and to organize neighborhood events. That I wanted to create a community where everyone felt welcome, where everyone felt valued, and where everyone felt empowered to stand up for themselves. That I wanted to create a community that was the antithesis of Karen's narrow-minded vision of suburban perfection. That it wasn't easy. There were still moments of frustration and irritation. There were still times when I had to bite my tongue and resist the urge to engage in petty arguments. But I persevered, knowing that every small act of kindness, every small act of resistance, was helping to create a more positive and harmonious community. Over time, I noticed a change in Karen's behavior. She stopped making snide comments, she stopped glaring at me from across the street, and she even offered a tentative wave on a few occasions. That I never became friends with her, but we reached a point of mutual respect and understanding. That I realized that even the most difficult people can change, if given the opportunity. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness, one act of resistance, to plant a seed of hope and to inspire a change for the better. The experience with Karen had been a challenge, but it had also been a gift. That it had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of standing up for myself, the power of community, and the transformative potential of kindness and compassion. And it had reminded me that even in the most ordinary of places, extraordinary things can happen, especially when you have the support of your brothers. The Karen phenomenon, as it's become known, is more than just a meme or a social media trend. That it's a reflection of deeper societal issues, a symptom of a culture that often prioritizes conformity over individuality, control over compassion, and self-righteousness over understanding. That it highlights the dangers of unchecked privilege, the corrosive effects of social pressure, and the importance of standing up against bullying and intimidation, no matter how subtle or seemingly insignificant. The incident on my porch was a microcosm of this larger phenomenon. It was a clash between two opposing worldviews, a battle between conformity and individuality, between control and freedom. And while my story had a happy ending, with Karen's retreat and the HOA's capitulation, the reality is that many people face similar situations every day, without the support of a squad of Marines to back them up. That's why it's so important to speak out against the Karen mentality, to challenge the assumptions and prejudices that underlie it, and to create a society where everyone feels respected, valued, and empowered to be themselves. This doesn't mean that we should condone rudeness or disrespect. It doesn't mean that we should abandon all standards of behavior or allow chaos to reign. It simply means that we should treat each other with kindness and compassion, even when we disagree. It means that we should respect the rights and freedoms of others, even when their choices differ from our own. It means that we should stand up for those who are being bullied or harassed, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. The world needs more empathy, more understanding, and more compassion. It needs more people who are willing to challenge the status quo, to stand up for what is right, and to create a more just and equitable society for all. So, the next time you encounter a Karen in the wild, remember my story. Remember the power of community, the importance of standing up for yourself, and the transformative potential of kindness and compassion. don't be afraid to speak out, to challenge their assumptions, and to remind them of the values that truly matter. But do it with respect, do it with empathy, and do it with the goal of creating a more positive and harmonious outcome. And remember, you are not alone. There are people who care about you, people who will support you, and people who will stand by you, no matter what. You just have to reach out and connect with them. The world is full of darkness, but it is also full of light that it's up to us to choose which one we want to focus on. Let's choose to focus on the light, to spread kindness and compassion, and to create a world where everyone feels welcome, valued, and empowered to be themselves. And let's never forget the importance of having good friends, especially the kind who will show up in full dress uniform when you need them most. Because sometimes, all it takes is a little bit of muscle, a little bit of camaraderie, and a whole lot of love to remind the Karens of the world exactly who they're dealing with. And to remind ourselves that we are not alone, that we are strong, and that we can overcome any challenge as long as we have each other.